So we're live. Next, we're going to hear from Todd Parfit with the Director of the Environmental Quality. Oh, there he is.
Mr. Chairman, this is
Yeah.
Chris. We need a few more people for quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we're not voting on anything, so I don't know if we need a quorum, do we?
Yes, we sure do.
Do we?
Yeah.
Really?
Can't have a meeting without a quorum. You've got one now.
We got
Go
a
ahead.
quorum now, so there you go. So,
I've been here, forgot to turn the camera on.
oh, yeah. So, Director Parfit, go ahead, take it away.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was contacted by LSO last week and asked to speak on reclamation efforts being undertaken by DEQ and efforts or possibilities to increase the amount of reclamation work being done by the agency, principally to put or keep more contractors working in these difficult times as we contend with the impacts of COVID-19. I'm going to focus on abandoned mine lands work and applicable programs under the Solid and Hazardous Waste Division because that's where the predominance of reclamation work by the agency occurs. I'll also briefly mention the status of abandoned coal bed methane water pits, and that's as a follow-up to what you've already heard from Supervisor Watson and Deputy Supervisor Kropatch earlier this morning. I'd also like to remind the committee that we will be getting into more detail on both AML and the Solid and Hazardous Waste Division programs, along with the air quality tomorrow, starting in the morning around 11:30. So I'll be brief with the remarks today and then take any questions. As Mr. Luthi mentioned in his presentation this morning, we've had discussions with the governor's office for several weeks on possible additional work opportunities, and we continue to explore those opportunities. So I'm going to start off with AML and just give you a contrast of the amount of work that's going out in 2020 compared to the amount of work that went out in 2019. So contracts and expenditures for 2019, our total expenditures, and this is both for construction and consulting services combined, was $56 million. We had 86 construction projects, and that's large and small, that amounted to 42 million, and then 30 consulting contracts that would include your professional engineering, clearances, NEPA and SHPO work. So 30 of those accounting for 14 million in expenditure. So for 2020, and this is calendar year, by the way, in calendar year 2020, our estimates are that we will be putting out the door an additional $38 million over what we put out last year. And I'll break that down for you. So we expect or project that we're going to put out the door $93.6 million worth of work in 2020. So we are projected to put out 94 construction projects at 57.6 million. So that's about a little over a $15 million increase from last year. And then we have these public facilities projects. So we had 10 public facilities projects for 20.6 million. Now there may be some delays in that work, just depending on the nature of the matches and where the communities sit. But we've got the financial agreements in place and approvals in place for those projects to move forward when the communities are ready. And then we have 31 consulting contracts valued at 16 million to go out the door. So when we're looking at these opportunities, we're really looking at two things. So first is how much more work can we get out the door? But also, as we do that, we know we're going to have some additional resource needs in those programs to support those additional contracts going out. So what we're looking at is, can we shift some staff from programs where they're more heavily funded with general funds and have the right skill sets over to the AML program where it's 100% federally funded. So you get two benefits. One, we get more work out the door, and two, we're using less general fund dollars to support our 100 series. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. We've identified in the AML program up to 8 small projects that we would get out under task orders. We're also looking at larger projects to determine if we can add some work to those. And we've projected that we should be able to add above the 92 or 93 million projected. We think we can add another 3 to 5 million in calendar year 2020. So that's what we're looking at in the AML program. And I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions.
Questions for Director Parfit? Yes, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, the monies you mentioned, does that also include the monies for the pre-qualified contractors for emergency work? Or is that separate from those dollars?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart, those would not be included in those numbers unless we already had an emergency contract in place. So no, it generally would not.
Follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So,
Yeah.
but you do have some money for those emergencies, such as the, subsidence in Hannah and a few other places that just sinkholes appeared overnight.
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, yes, we do have funding available for those types of events.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Ruffus.
sorry to interrupt, but I think Senator Coe might be in the waiting room as opposed to in the committee room. If you could release him and perhaps anyone else that's in the waiting room.
Well, there's a couple in the waiting room, but he isn't one of them.
You don't see a Henry H. Coe. No H.
Mr.
Coe.
Chairman, Senator Coe's in the meeting. His camera's just not on.
Gotcha. Is his camera released? He says that he can't get his camera on. Maybe you need to release that, perhaps. Looks like we got him. Thanks.
Senator Bateman's on the meeting, but he just isn't. Oh, there he is. He just isn't showing either. Okay.
So I can go ahead
I
and
guess we're back to you, Todd.
all right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so now I'll shift to the solid and hazardous waste division. And there's 3 primary reclamation programs with some limited opportunity to expedite reclamation. And those 3 programs are the storage tank program, the Orphan site program, and the landfill remediation program. And I just point out right off the bat that all 3 of those programs are funded, if you recall, through the corrective action account. And we have the ability to divert a certain amount of funding from the corrective action account to the landfill remediation program and orphan sites, provided that there's sufficient funding for the storage tank program. So I'm going to start with the storage tank program, give you a little bit of a background there. We started out with, at the beginning of the program back in the early 90s, with 1,635 contaminated sites. 1,306 have been remediated. There are 323 in corrective action currently, so they're generally budgeted for. And then there are 6 remaining, and of those 6, 4 were scheduled to begin work next year. Now, we'll take a look at the possibility of expediting those as much as possible, but not a whole lot left in the inventory there. And this is what we had talked about when we decided, I should say when the state decided to offer the opportunity to divert some of those funds to landfill remediation and orphan sites, is that The storage tank program, we're starting to wind down, but we do have to maintain a minimum funding level as we go forward. So that's the storage tank program. The second program, Orphan sites, we have 28 known orphan sites. 6 have been remediated. 13 are in active investigation or remediation, and then 9 sites are awaiting investigation. And here is where there might be some opportunity. Last year, last July, we had the opportunity under the statute to divert $1 million out of the corrective action account for orphan sites, and we did that. However, with the collections that we're seeing on the fuel tax this year, we're starting to see that, we'll see a decline. And so it's questionable whether or not there will be sufficient funds to divert monies over to the orphan site program. So that's our projection. So what we're looking at is we have $1 million available right now to proceed with our efforts to address orphan sites. And we'll do that in an expedited manner to try to get those funds out the door within the next 12 months. And just as a reminder, in this second year or so in the statute, 3511-424, we can divert up to $4 million into the landfill remediation program and $1 million into orphan sites, provided that we have sufficient funding for the storage tank program. In 2021, that ramps up to $5 million to the landfill remediation program. So, which takes me into the landfill program. A little bit of background there. We had investigated 112 known landfills and identified that there was some level of contamination of groundwater from 83 of those landfills. And the estimated cost, which we revised in 2015, was the cost of remediating those 83 landfills is $280 million. And the state share, if we pay 75%, the way the statute's designed, the state share is $210 million. Right now, we're working on the 5 highest priority sites. We had previously been appropriated up 26 over the years, 26 million for landfill remediation, and then we added some monies through the corrective action account in 2019. So right now we have a balance of 9.2 million. And we'll be looking to expedite expenditures, taking on new landfills on the priority list, or more aggressively pushing forward with the existing ones to try to get some of that 9.2 million out the door as quickly as possible. So I'm going to stop there. That's it for the solid and hazardous waste in those 3 programs. So I'll stop and take any questions.
Any questions for solid waste, hazardous waste? Hazardous and solid waste. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. The first, getting back to the AML funds concept, do we have any projects that are sort of on the back burner that we might be considering or planning for that are potentially viable or we could expedite? And do we even have the flexibility to do that based on the requirements on the AML expenditures to reach kind of down a little further than we normally would? Or do we still have enough kind of those tier 1 obligations to keep the focus there?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, the short answer is yes. We do have the flexibility. And that's where I say we've identified some projects that we think we can move forward. So you have to do the NEPA work and some of the clearance work and some of the engineering. And that's what we're looking at right now. And that's where the additional 3 to 5 million would be to dip into.
Great, thanks. Mr. Chairman, follow up
Yes.
on the on the solid waste and our basically our lists that we've always got, and whether there's available funding, is there are there any projects we've talked about this before where the synergy is there, where maybe we need a little extra money but we can end up saving as a result of doing multiple projects at the same time? Are we at that point on the list where we'd be saving money if we could just bring on another $1 million or whatever else? In other words, would it be beneficial and cost effective for us to have an additional appropriation in this upcoming special session?
Mr. Chairman, Senator of our office, at this point, we've got the 9.2 million. We are scheduled to, I don't know that we'll draw the full 4 million come July 1 or not. It might be a little less than that. But we're going to be well over 10 million of, in work that we can get out the door. So I'm not sure that we're going to see that kind of synergy type project out there that you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other questions? Todd, you said we had 112 known landfills and 83 of them have groundwater contamination. And at the 75% rate, that was 210 million for the state. That 75, do we pay 75 or does somebody else pay 75 and we pay 25, or how does that work?
So, Mr. Chairman, the way the statute is set up is that the landfill remediation program, or the state, would pay 75% of the cost of the remediation, and then the community or the owner of the landfill would come up with the other 25%. And they could do that through a variety of mechanisms.
Yeah, okay. All right. Other questions? Other questions? Hearing none.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was coal bed methane reservoirs. There's been some discussion about that this morning. So maybe provide a little bit of insight from the DEQ's perspective. As was mentioned this morning in the conversation, there's what's called in-stream and off-stream reservoirs. What we have been dealing with are the in-stream or on-stream reservoirs. And those are typically in the uplands. We have those reservoirs bonded. Right now we're looking at, there are 450 remaining coal bed methane on-channel reservoirs. We hold 16 million in bonds with 15 companies. And through a variety of mechanisms, there's roughly 5.5 million right now that is being considered for either reclamation or transfer to a landowner. And that's an important concept here, is that the first question is always to the landowner: do they want to maintain the reservoir or not? And so that's the first question asked. And then in order to make that transfer to the landowner, they have to go through a process with the state engineer's office. And then the state engineer's office would look at safety of dams issues and so forth, depending on the size of the impoundment. We DEQ have done some of the reclamation through forfeited bonds. And so we had a contract of just shy of $1 million, which we're getting to the end of. We're close to completing that work. But as far as new work goes, we're working with the companies that hold the bond to either wait for a resolution on if it goes to the landowner. If it doesn't go to the landowner, then the reclamation would occur. And we usually are working with the bondholder to determine if it's cheaper for them to do the work, they'll do it. If it's not, then they'll release the bond to us, and then we'll work with it and reclaim those. So that's the current status. I'd be happy to take any question.
Questions. I think the questions we had this morning were, what could we do to kick that schedule up so we can get our oil field guys working, backfilling some of those reservoirs that maybe we're not ready to do now? And does that require some legislation or some money, or what would you need to kick that up?
So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I don't know that we need any statutory changes. I think I think the biggest opportunity is for the agency or the program to work with the operators to expedite the process of determining whether they're going to remediate or go to the landowner. If we can avoid going to the, if we forfeit the bond, we have to go to the Environmental Quality Council, and that's going to take time and delay things. If we can get the operators to, or the bonding companies to move forward, just to make sure that we encourage them to move at a quicker pace.
And what will that take?
Well, right now we're talking about we've got several companies that are either in bankruptcy or we are currently talking with on what the resolution is going to be. Either the landowner is going to take them or not. So I think we can work with the landowners and the companies to get resolution on which reservoirs are not going to be reclaimed.
Representative Crank, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it sounds to me like is there a means to incentivize the bonding folks to help you release? Because you can't just go in there and start doing reclamation without a release or whatnot. So if we had some means of through the legislature of giving them some incentives to get that going, would that make sense?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Crank, I don't know if I can speak to whether or not that would make sense or not, but it's certainly, if there's an incentive to move the ball quicker, it certainly wouldn't hurt.
Any other questions? Other questions of Todd Parfit? Any other questions? Other questions? Does that conclude your comments?
Mr. Chairman, that does. Until tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your comments, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is public comments, and I don't know how many public comments we have here.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
believe Tom Darren is available, as well as Joe Morrison, as well as Adam Seuss.
Okay. I think I saw Tom Darren on there first. Let's go with him. Tom Darren, are you on there?
Yes, hi there. I'm just checking to see, Mr. Chairman, if you can see my picture. I can't yet on Zoom.
Well, we don't see it. Just see your name. There you go.
I think I'm there now. I apologize. I had to switch rooms. There seems to be, and I had to start video again. I apologize for the inconvenience.
No worries. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, both Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tom Darren, and I am Senior Director of Western State Affairs for the American Wind Energy Association. We represent the country's top wind, solar, and storage developers, many of which are actively investing in new project development in Wyoming. Renewable energy resources are an existing and growing component of Wyoming's energy strategy and will be an important part of the current economic recovery we're facing now and the economic package as we move forward, including job creation, new local and state tax streams, and other economic benefits. Just a quick sketch of where we are, Mr. Chairman. The wind industry has already invested $3.3 billion over the past 10 or 15 years in Wyoming, which has led to thousands of construction jobs, in addition to permanent jobs with wind and solar technicians by the U.S. Department of Labor, is the very two hottest growing job sectors in the entire US economy. Existing wind projects in Wyoming already contribute $20 million each and every single year in state and local taxes and lease payments to private landowners. And those are over the life of the project. So that's every year. And our development is just a fraction of its full potential. The state's solar capacity is in the top 10 in the country, has already seen 1 or 2 utility scale projects started, as we talked about in the legislative in 2020. And that potential is just set to be tapped. Mr. Chairman, in terms of where we are headed, Mr. Obermuller from PAW this morning captured it perfectly. All industries, including energy, need stability, predictability, and a cost competitive environment in which to operate. The wind industry is no different. The wind industry has had 2 significant tax increases since 2010, and at least 8 to 10 efforts in the past few years alone to increase the wind generation, or excise tax as it's called, or add an electricity generation tax. This is the exact opposite of stable, certain, or predictable. Wyoming is the only state in the country with all 3 of the following taxes placed on wind: sales and use, property, and excise. Currently, according to the University of Wyoming and Dr. Godby study from about a year ago, Wyoming ranks 4th in the Western region after New Mexico, Colorado, and Montana in terms of a competitive tax regime. To be clear, especially in light of the testimony that I was pleased to listen to this morning, we are not asking for a tax break. We are just asking that this current tax profile that I mentioned be left intact and not subject to being revisited 2 to 3 times every single year as we've been facing. In that sense, we look forward to being a good partner with the new Wyoming Energy Authority that we heard about this morning that has its priorities spot on: energy diversification, removing barriers to development, and creating certainty around the tax environment in the state. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, here is where that certainty can take us. Wind projects already permitted by the state's Industrial Siting Council and already in various stages of production and development can bring $10 billion of new investment to Wyoming in the upcoming years. Those are Wyoming projects. This will create thousands of construction and permanent jobs and over $1.5 billion in new excise, sales and use, and property taxes. Now, just to be clear, that $1.5 billion in new tax revenues would be over the lifetimes of those projects for about the next 20 to 25 years. That's a cumulative figure. On these points, we agree with Mr. Luthi from the governor's office this morning on the key that there's a difference between the tax rate and tax revenue. Keep the tax rate competitive, and these types of results I just mentioned can and will happen. To go too high could result in 0 revenue if our projects and our companies are not competitive in the Western region, and a wind project in New Mexico or a solar project in Arizona or Nevada wins out on a competitive solicitation, their project gets built, and that wind project I just mentioned, or several of them in Wyoming, don't, because we weren't competitive. I'll conclude with this sentiment. Our industry wants to be a strong and valued energy partner in the state. We are here now and are already part of bringing Wyoming out of this recession. As a present example, and I saw them when I was in Cheyenne in February and March on the I-25 corridor. But when you see wind turbine components on the trucks on I-25 and construction not too far from Cheyenne along I-80, you are seeing jobs. And those are both new and retained jobs. You are seeing a diversifying economy in Wyoming. You are seeing Wyoming cement, gravel, storage, transportation, hotel, restaurant, and other industries getting more business from what we're actively doing in Wyoming today. And you're seeing brand new tax streams coming into Wyoming state and local coffers. And we know how important those are, critically important right now. We are here now and are contributing to Wyoming's energy strategy and economic recovery. And we have no special asks on the table. Let's just work together to keep that happening in the years and the decades to come. And that's what we'd like to do. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to have this amount of time with you today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Darren. Yes, any questions for Mr. Darren? Any questions for Mr. Darren? No questions? Okay, well, we do appreciate the wind industry. Obviously, we've made a statement many times that we need all the energy avenues we can have in Wyoming. Every one of them is important to us. And obviously, wind's getting to be a bigger and bigger deal for Wyoming every day. So we hope for it to increase a lot. We can't guarantee you hear people wanting to change things, but that doesn't mean it'll get changed. So we'll see what happens.
I appreciate that. Thank you, both Joint Chairman and members of the committee.
Yep, thank you. All right, and next is Adam Seuss. Dr. Seuss's son? Grandson? Adam Seuss.
Just a distant relative, Chairman.
Oh, okay, okay.
The type that doesn't get any royalty checks from the books.
Oh, darn it. Oh, darn it.
Well, Chairman Anderson, Chairman Greer, I appreciate you allowing me to join the meeting today, and all of your colleagues. I appreciate the time. I wanted to. My name is Adam Seuss, and I'm the Vice President of Government Relations for Sinclair Oil Corporation. I work for the other Sinclair companies as well. What I wanted to do today is to share with you a bit of what's going on at Sinclair, what's going on now, what's gone on in the past few months, and what we see on the horizon. Also, talk a little bit more about the refining sector more broadly in the state of Wyoming. So as you all have undoubtedly heard repeatedly from every industry, that's been a really tough period. And that's no different for us. Our industry, the refining industry, and the use of motor fuels hasn't been shut down. We were deemed essential by state governments and by the federal government, but indirectly, of course, because people were either required to stay in their homes or encouraged to stay in their homes, rightfully so, of course. In many instances, the use of gasoline and diesel really fell off a cliff. So at its low point, we saw gasoline in March and April, parts of May down over 60%. And diesel held stronger because of agricultural interest, transportation, trucking, mining interest, and so on. It held stronger, but it was still down 25% at times. And we have seen a bit of an uptick in that in recent weeks, some light on the horizon, which we're very thankful for. It will still be a bad year, of course. It's going to be a bad year for everyone, but worse than just dealing with a bad quarter or a bad half year, we know that demand for transportation fuels is not going to bounce back immediately. People are going to be reluctant at times to travel. Of course, air travel is way down. People will still be working from home. And so we know that demand doesn't bounce back quickly. So it's been a tough year. I think that it bears mentioning that Sinclair has not laid off any employees, has continued to employ everyone that it employed at the beginning of the year, which I think is a testament to the leadership and the ownership of the company. Our company employs about 500 individuals at the Sinclair refinery and roughly 150 at the Casper refinery. Many dozens more for the transportation company, the pipeline and the trucking company. Of course, there are a lot of contractors that we bring in routinely and great amounts during operational turnarounds and things along those lines. They're great jobs too. That's the important thing. That's what we're proud of. The average salary of a Sinclair refinery employee is over $100,000. That's not just senior management. That's from top to bottom, over $100,000. Of course, matching 401k, retirement, and other ways, healthcare, and all the rest. So we're proud of the jobs that we offer to the folks who work for us, and we are very fortunate to have them. I'll mention one other thing. The refinery employees certainly deserve their due attention because of the complex nature of the refinery in Sinclair and some other operational opportunities at the refinery in Casper, and most importantly, due to the real strong talents of our individuals, we were able to shift our production mix, almost invert it entirely. In normal times, we produce about 65% gasoline, 35% distillate. And again, because of the demand that held so strong on diesel, gas was so low, we did all that we could to produce more diesel. And again, all credit to our refinery employees. They were able to nearly invert it, where we were able to produce 65% diesel and 35% gasoline. So that was a real blessing. But the bottom line is that times are tough. I will share one other relevant point, is that times aren't tough just because of a drop in use of motor fuels, but there's a corollary to that, and it's the RFS program. And you all, I think, have heard from us and our refining colleagues at Holly Frontier and Par Pacific, that the RFS program is an overwhelming burden to our success because of a low use of motor fuels. You're having less blending of biofuels into motor fuels just because of a drop in demand. And that means that there are less credits on the market to comply with the Renewable Fuel Standard program. And that, of course, means that those credits are more costly. So that's just an additional burden that refineries within the state, refineries across the states, are going to have to deal with. And it's very unfortunate. Mike Jennings, I say it's relevant. It's particularly relevant today. Mike Jennings, the CEO at Holly Frontier, touched on that in their press release a bit today, that how difficult the RFS program is to deal with, especially given a 10th Circuit decision from January that's going to potentially limit small refinery hardship relief from the RFS program. So there are a lot of headwinds for refineries, especially small refineries, which are all of the refineries in Wyoming. And so I mention all of that to say that because of I'll just say that Sinclair and other manufacturing companies of our size have not received relief or stimulus from the CARES Act. And as I've said in numerous conversations, I understand legislators, of course, have to make judgments, and that's the job. And it just so happens that the judgments that Congress made left Sinclair on the outside looking in, not just Sinclair, but other manufacturers and other industries throughout the state of Wyoming. And it would be beneficial to us, I've said to many of you, and I appreciate you hearing me out, to be beneficial for those companies that were either too big or not big enough to get relief from the federal government to receive some sort of stimulus relief from Wyoming. And we believe in our industry. We have a lot of headwinds, but we believe in it. We really do believe that we drive the economy. That's often just a phrase you hear, people playing on words, but we think that gas and diesel, if we didn't have the production that we have across the United States of gasoline and diesel, I think you would see a dramatic hit to the economy. So we believe in the products that we provide. We believe in their value. It's low cost way to keep our economy moving. But times are tough. We're going to continue to fight on. We're going to continue to employ our people. We're going to continue to produce the products that the folks of Wyoming and the surrounding areas need. But some relief would be helpful in this moment. So that's the state of affairs for us. And I want to thank you all for considering it, hearing me out, and understanding and appreciating the difficulty of the moment, which I know you do. So thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Why don't I unmute there and ask if there's any questions for, oh, there's Representative Greer, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Seuss, I have a couple questions. So Sinclair was of a size that did not qualify for under the PPP. You're over the 500 in the aggregate. Is that right?
Well, Chairman, it's a little more complicated than that. Sinclair, interestingly, is actually a small business according to SBA regulations because they allow for up to 1,500 employees for the refining sector. But the problem came in with the affiliation rules. The Sinclair companies owns the oil company, a hospitality company, and a ranching company. And so together, all of the employees together put us outside the bounds of the program. Just a quick note on that. The oil company is doing the best of the three, and it's not doing good and by traditional standards. And when you put the three balance sheets together, they look just as bad together as they do individually, if you know what I mean.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, so my understanding with a significant decline in demand for the products of the Wyoming refineries, you kept all of your employees on there over the last 4 months?
Yes, sir. That's right. There were a few exceptions of our transportation drivers who are paid by the truckload, and because demand was down so low, they were working so little that there was some benefits under the CARES Act, increased unemployment insurance and all the rest, that they stood to do better in that circumstance. So they asked that the company furlough them. Many of them, if not all of them, are back working today.
So, Mr. Chairman, so how long has Sinclair been in Wyoming? How long do you intend to stay?
The refineries have been in, at least the Sinclair refinery, if I'm not mistaken, has been in Wyoming for since the 20s. Now, I think that Representative Burkhart might know a bit more about it and can correct the record if I have that wrong, but we have no plans of going anywhere. And you all know quite often, or many of you, maybe all of you know better than I do, but the Holding family has a rich and honorable history in the state of Wyoming, and they certainly value the state and its culture and just love doing business in the state. So I think the answer is as long as we can make it.
Any other questions? Representative Burkhart, did you want to clear up how long he's been here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Sinclair has been here over 100 years. It wasn't long ago they celebrated their 100th anniversary here in Wyoming, in Sinclair, Wyoming. And that, so a long history with the state for a privately held company who's put a lot into Wyoming, not just here, but the Casper refinery, some of the ranching lands, the hospitality portion of it, all combined. I do have a question for Mr. Seuss, which is, do you know offhand about how much of the gasoline fuel, diesel fuel used in Wyoming comes out of the Sinclair refineries?
I know roughly, I would say about 40%. And I've heard some numbers talked about that. You're going to get from the northern part of the state, I think you're going to get a fair amount fed from the Billings refineries. Towards the southern part of the state, I think you get a lot more from Rollins and from Casper. Our rack business is pretty solid. It doesn't get on a pipeline. It's put in a truck right there at the refineries. So given that, a relatively small state, but we sell a good amount of barrels at both the racks. So I think it's about that percentage, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up to that then. Mr. Seuss, about how much of your crude do you get, let's say, locally or regionally? I don't think you're getting much from offshore, are you?
Nothing from offshore. And so we do source some from the mid-continent, but the Bakken region and some production in Wyoming does certainly supply a good amount of the crude to the refineries.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think when we talked before, I asked, I believe it was Joan was going to find out how much actually came from Wyoming or the region. I haven't heard back from her, but I think that's important information, and why it can't be more. I mean, if it's just bidding or if it's quality of product or something that would cause that to not be used.
Yeah, that's right, Chairman. And I sent along your inquiry to my friends at Holly Frontier and Par Pacific. I think that, my friends at Holly Frontier have been looking at other things, over the past days. So they've been probably sidetracked. But I'll certainly reach back out and get some answers on that.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Seuss? Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Seuss, for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
And next is Jill Morrison with Powder River. I think it shows up as Powder River here. But they tell me it's Jill Morrison, really. Maybe she's on there. Maybe she isn't on there. We'll skip her for the moment and go to Travis Detail.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll keep my comments fairly brief. I just wanted to direct my initial comments towards this morning's discussion from Mr. Steggy and Mrs. Hutchinson with the Wyoming Energy Authority, and just let the committee know that we really do appreciate their work in reaching out to industry, and we had some very good discussions in preparing for this particular committee meeting and looking at some of the goals and the priorities of the infrastructure, or rather the Wyoming Energy Authority. In particular, we're pleased that among those priorities are the continued work on carbon capture and technology, and building on what we've done already to ensure that we can get to that point to where we can find carbon capture technology that is deployable and commercially viable. From the coal industry side, that is simply critical. I've said this before this committee, it doesn't matter what you think about your opinions on global warming, but right now, markets and everything else looks at carbon capture, and it's going to be there in the near future, and we need to crack that nut. And so it's appropriate for the Wyoming Energy Energy Authority to maintain that as a priority. And we're also pleased that on their list is the continuing advocacy for export of Wyoming coal. One of the things that we definitely need to do to keep Wyoming's coal resource viable is to find those new markets. They do exist overseas, and even in the time that we're in right now, we are optimistic that we will come back and that those markets will be there. And so having the Wyoming Energy Authority as an advocate for Wyoming coal exports is critical, and we appreciate that. And also, as Mr. Steggy mentioned, there's an opportunity for the Energy Authority to be an advocate for the comeback of Wyoming's uranium industry. Right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern to see what the federal government is going to do on the commitment to develop a domestic uranium stockpile. But we think the Energy Authority could certainly play a role there in assisting our congressional delegation in particular in being an advocate for the Wyoming uranium extraction industry. And with that, I do want to say one thing. I want to thank the committee and the body as a whole, we really appreciate your work on the grant programs and getting that through the full body. In particular, the COVID-19 mitigation grant program. We do have companies that will be able to take advantage of that. Our companies have spent in the hundreds of thousands, approaching the $1 million range in mitigating for COVID-19 protocols with on the work sites to keep our miners safe. And so that's really going to be helpful, I think, as the year kind of winds down, to have those companies be able to apply to get some of that reimbursed, because it has been a tremendous unforeseen cost for our folks, and really appreciated. We will have companies that'll be able to take advantage of the other grant programs too. We did have a couple of operators that were able to take advantage of the PPP program, but not all. And what you guys did with the grant programs coming from the COVID-19 money from the CARES stimulus is really going to help. So thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, that's really all I had. We support the work of the Wyoming Energy Authority, and thank you for all of your efforts in this tough time.
Any questions for Mr. Detai? Any questions for Mr. Detai? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I just, I can't let Mr. Detai go without giving him a hard time. When's the last time you've set the time on the clock behind you?
That's Mr. Chairman, Chairman Greer, that is a stick-on up on the wall. Mr. Chairman, that clock,
I think he's in Hawaii.
That clock hasn't worked since I've been here, so.
I agree. I agree. It looks like you're in Hawaii to me.
That's my background. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Any other good questions? Any other good questions? Okay, Mr. Detai, thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. Powder River, Jill Morrison, are you on there or still not on there? Anyone else for public testimony? Anyone else for public testimony? Anyone else for public testimony on energy strategy and issues? If not, we'll close public comment. Thank you. And we'll move right on to the Business Council, Wyoming Business Council. And LSO will introduce the subject for us, please.
Mr. Chairman, in respect of the Business Council's time and the committee's limited time with the Business Council today, I'll just note that there is a topic summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee has about it.
Any questions about the summary that LSO has produced for you? Which is pretty good. Pretty good summary. No questions with that. If not, we'll go right into the Business Council, and Josh Durrell, the new CEO, will address us. Please, Josh.
Thank you, Co-Chair Anderson. I appreciate that. We do have a presentation to walk through, if I may. Thank you all for joining today, and thank you for your hard work. I know that the grant program that we're in the middle of administering and getting set up came from this committee, and we really appreciate the opportunity to take this to the businesses across the state. So I wanted to thank you for that. In the interest of time, we do have our first public webinar today at 4 p.m. to walk people through the process, as well as show them the application that will launch this week. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone on this committee was aware of that. And hopefully we can wrap up maybe 1 minute before 4 at least, so that we have a moment to get ready for that webinar and launch this program that you put together. So thank you. With that, I will share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Please let me know if you are able to see it, maybe just to signify by putting a thumbs up.
We can see it.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. Well, again, thank you all for your time today and your work. We thought we would go through. I do have some other folks available for questions as well. I have Josh Keefe and Sarah Fitzgerald here as well to answer questions as we go through this presentation. What we thought we would talk a little bit today is our unique challenge that we have in front of us. Obviously, it's not just COVID-19, but other economic challenges in front of us. We do want to talk a little bit about our COVID-19 response and the opportunities that are in front of us, as well as the work that we've done up to this point. We want to engage in a little bit of discussion around the strategy execution, and then have a bit of an open discussion with the committee on how to continue to improve that, and hear about what is going on in some of your communities, as well as what you've been hearing throughout the state. And then Josh Keefe will be there to talk a little bit about some of the agriculture economic disaster loans and provide a report on that. So as I noted, we have COVID-19 as definitely a big economic shock, but there were some other things as well. When we think about COVID-19, we've had around 12,000 businesses who received some federal aid through the SBA. So that's a tremendous amount. And we know that from the legislation put forth and gone through the process that will continue. Hopefully with our plan, we'll be able to find those that fell through the cracks, as well as aid those who still need additional assistance. The other thing that happened since maybe we last met was the rig count decreased 90% since March, and that is a tremendous amount there. And then we know that the Powder River Basin coal industry is down as well, and that has there have been quite a number of layoffs. I don't know, I believe those are the up-to-date figures, but as you can see, economically, it's a challenge for us. And I think us looking at how to rise up from this and to take the next step is going to be very difficult. As you can imagine, it's not just what we mentioned on that slide, but when those, especially when those extraction industries are down, it affects everything, and not just the state's revenues, but those main streets as well. And so, there are businesses that are out there fighting to survive, and it's a big challenge. And these are some of the things that we've heard, and I'm sure these are not new comments. The committee members have, I'm sure, heard this throughout their communities and from their friends and relatives and neighbors, and know that it's a very tough time out there. And so, we've done our best to make sure that we can help out as much as possible during this time. I think many of you have likely heard me talk a little bit about the things in press conferences that we have done, and talked in other conversations about those. We really wanted to make sure that we provided a response that was immediate, that could help those businesses in the short term, as well as looking at now these grant programs. And then finally, we are continuing to look at how do we help the Wyoming businesses look to the future, and then how do we continue to really attract those businesses from outside the state to come to Wyoming and see it as an attractive place, because we know, and we're hearing it on the news, we're hearing it from our recruitment team, that Wyoming is becoming an attractive place because of its sparse population density.
Josh, we have
Mr. Chairman?
a question.
Yes.
Yeah, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Josh, did you provide this slide presentation to us? Because I'm not finding it in my packet.
That's a good question. I thought that we had, but perhaps that slipped through the cracks. So I apologize, Representative Duncan.
That's okay. If it's on the website, I'll just quickly download it. I was just quickly looking, so thank you.
Okay. Let me find out.
It's online if you're online, Representative Duncan.
I'll grab it if it's online. Thank you.
Okay, we'll make sure that gets in your hands. Thank you. Thank you for that question. We'll jump back into our response to COVID-19 has been, we felt, again, fortunate to be in a position where we could help. not fortunate that we have to work with this particular crisis, but at the same time be there to help. And we've done that in a few different ways. I think immediately what we wanted to be able to do was coordinate efforts and communicate the resources that were available to businesses throughout the state. And so we did a number of webinars that, I think we've probably had in the thousands of attendees to those webinars to really help businesses with all of the resources that were available and work them through that transition. We did a great number of that with the SBA and helping companies with EIDL, as well as the Paycheck Protection Program, so that those resources could be utilized. We obviously are not taking credit for any of that the SBA did, but over $1 billion, I think, in PPP loans that are hopefully all forgivable for those businesses were delivered in Wyoming. So that's a great number. We continue to also look at ways to help, not just on helping businesses get financing, but we also worked with a number of businesses to help them sort of pivot and help out. We had this hand sanitizer program as well as the PPE manufacturing projects that went on, and we were able to locate some community development block grant funds in order to fund both of those programs to get about $800,000 worth of money in the hands of those businesses so that they could respond to this crisis. I think that helped them be very helpful throughout the state, but also it made it so that our county health organizations could benefit from that hand sanitizer as well as PPE. I don't need to go too in depth with the business relief programs. You know them probably much better than I. Those rules are now in the hands of the governor for review and the AG for approval, and so those rules were taken. Of course, changes occurred after the legislative session from some vetoes from the governor, as well as some additions, or excuse me, some clarification from Treasury and the Attorney Generals in terms of what to put in the rules. And so those rules were approved by our board of directors on Friday, and now are being reviewed again by the governor's office. And then we'll be hopefully putting that program in place mid this week. As I mentioned, we are starting the public outreach and the webinars there because we feel like it's important to make sure businesses understand how that program works, what they need to get prepared, so that the businesses that were most impacted could begin applying as soon as possible. And then finally, we have been doing our best to look toward the future and figure out ways to help those businesses that are in Wyoming, stay strong and be resilient. One of the things that we found over the last few weeks and months is that businesses are much more amenable to looking at what is going to make them strong in the future. Sometimes when things are going well, you can kind of get by and maybe not be as strong, and you can just make it work. Whereas a crisis really demonstrates some of the challenges that we have and some of the opportunities for improvement that our businesses have. And we want to be there to help with that programming, help with the business resilience, and help them be strong in times that are tough, but also be very, very successful in times that are a little bit easier. And so we've put together a number of ideas that we'll hopefully be able to enact soon. In terms of business resilience, making sure that those small businesses have the accounting knowledge that they need, the finance knowledge that they need to run their businesses efficiently and effectively. We're also looking at that from a community point of view and working with communities to say, okay, what do you want to be? If you could define your path, what will it look like, and how will we help you get there as a whole? And then, of course, looking individually, when we've seen some great examples of companies that are saying, okay, now I'm going to pivot and do something different. And maybe I'm going to take my talent and apply it in a different way. And so we want to be able to help companies do that with some structured tools. And then, of course, strengthening our business communities by recruiting and making sure that we can bring new companies and new talent to the state of Wyoming. And again, I think we've got some great messaging. We've got some great help from the national media, frankly, and being able to bring new talent to Wyoming and let them thrive here. We'll take just this is again, it's putting this graphic together and displaying it to this committee seems a little bit silly on one hand, because you know it better than I do. And laying out these programs. We began this process this morning with a number of representatives and senators from around the state, as well as local government officials, to really show these three programs and how they work together, and really focusing in on program one, as it is the one that is imminent this week.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Senator Coe would like to ask a question.
Coe, do you have a question? I saw your blue hand.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. If I could, I'd like to know if Josh could share any of the rules yet with us, and any place for businesses to access these rules. And I know you're having a webinar this afternoon. How will businesses access the webinars, or can they?
Thank you, Senator Coe. Mr. Chairman, may I address that?
Yes. Yep. Go, Josh.
Thank you. Yes, so we have a website at www.wybizrelief, that's wyobizrelief.org, where a lot of this information will be available. I could absolutely share that information with the committee. And as I mentioned, we are putting together a series of webinars. The first one will start this afternoon at 4, and we'll have webinars each day of this week and continue on as we're taking applications. So we will be taking those applications through our website, which has a number of resources about the rules, as well as a frequently asked questions section, so that we can best educate our businesses on how to take advantage of that program.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Duncan.
Thank you. Josh, this is not on the website, by the way. It's not, and we have not received it. So if you could make sure that we get this, because I personally like to take notes on your presentation, on your information as we go. And I'd like to study these, this information a little more in depth. Also, as you're presenting all this and you're doing this webinar, it's really imperative that this is massively released. This is really important, that this is boots on the ground, that this needs to get out. Have you sent this out to the economic developments? Have you sent this out to the Chamber of Commerce's? Have you sent this out to the local entities to make sure that they truly blast this out, so that everybody gets this information today, that they're ready to hit this webinar today? Because I'm hearing about it for the first time today.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I think one other group we got to add to that is the bankers. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And Representative Duncan, I completely agree. So we've been reaching out to all of those parties that you mentioned, including others throughout the state, to begin promoting that. So yes, that is happening today. It's happened since the middle of last week. And we're doing both partner webinars, which are with those groups that you mentioned, so that they can become the trainers, if you will, and business assistants, as well as the mouthpiece. And one of the asks that we had of our during our sessions this morning, which came rather quickly, but were well attended, was for the local government agents, as well as the representatives and senators that showed up, was to make sure that they begin talking with constituents about this and sharing that. So we will continue, as you mentioned, you are 100% correct that the key to this program is making sure that it has broad and wide usage by our businesses. And we're definitely doing our best to get it out there. So I can appreciate that this is the beginning of what you've heard, but we will continue to trumpet it out.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Yes, Representative Duncan.
Thank you. And Josh, I would really caution you and really reiterate, keep every single senator, every single representative on a list. Send out all this information and all these webinars, tag them on this list and make sure that they participate in these webinars, because they're going to be your best advocates. Because we were the ones that promoted this. So we are going to be your best advocates to get this out there, because otherwise if it's not promoted, it's not going to work. So I really caution you to make sure that you make us partners with you to really get that out there, because we're going to be also the boots on the ground.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Josh.
Thank you. And our communications director is on right now and listening to that. So I we'll make sure that gets pushed out. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Another question for Representative Laux.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to comment. I've been receiving plenty of things from the Business Council. And I imagine somehow Representative Duncan got just left off an email or something, but I've been seeing stuff from you guys every day. So, thank you.
I have to admit I haven't. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, I have a question, and these programs are rolling out quickly. I think it's very important, and I appreciate that. But I do have a question about a little bit about the process, and this is particularly for Program 1, and how the rules were put together. Maybe this is coming up, but I don't have the presentation to know whether it's ahead of us now. But I know that the eligibility requirement for Program 1 is very explicitly for-profit, privately or publicly owned business, but it must be for-profit. That eligibility requirement is contrary to what the Senate and the House independently each decided. And whether it's right or wrong, I mean, there were good debate in the Senate. It was a 15-14 vote, in fact, so it was close. But my curiosity is, why did the executive branch decide to go the exact opposite direction from what both chambers of the legislature decided?
Mr. Chairman?
Josh, you want to handle that one?
Excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, you want to handle that? Yeah.
Yes, please. Yes, please. And great question, Senator Rothfuss. I really appreciate the question. It's something that has come up quite a bit. I think and I'll probably answer this a few more times this week. I've gotten to answer it at least 3 times in webinars this morning, and I expect it as many webinars as we give, I'll expect to answer it. And I appreciate it. And it is that was a tough one. And part of the thinking is that it was unanimous. I think it was very, very clear from the Senate and from the House that businesses were the intent. And then, as you mentioned, there were some pretty interesting debates about how nonprofits should be included. And so I think with that, we definitely wanted to make sure that the primary businesses who ultimately support nonprofits are taken care of first. And then I think the other part of it is, we did reach out to a number of nonprofits and talk with them a little bit about it. Most of them understood that businesses come first, and that was what was important. And to make sure that there was a very clear and a very direct line for these small businesses, the for-profit businesses, that I think everybody here wanted to make sure was taken care of. And so while I see exactly the question, and I totally understand it, I think the key was to think these small businesses first, make sure that they were taken care of. And, I obviously can't make any promises. I have no pull here, but hopefully something could come down the line for those nonprofits.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Follow up, sure.
Well, on that point, is there anything for the nonprofits? Because again, they have lots of employees, they suffer all the same problems. And obviously when we're talking about nonprofits, we don't just mean, political organizations that are seeking campaign contributions and trying to lobby on behalf of some issue. I think that was what came up and what caused concern. But we know that there are nonprofits throughout the state that have entirely different profiles, and they're getting rid of employees, they're struggling, they're having challenges. We in the legislature effectively didn't do anything about that this last special session, because at the end of it all, it was our impression that this would allow eligibility for nonprofits. So if the executive branch is going to interpret it such that this does not cover nonprofits, then my question for the executive branch is, which programs are going to help the nonprofits that are facing the same circumstances?
Before you answer that, Senator Coe, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we're a little bit out of kilter here a little bit with the nonprofits, because you can have big nonprofits like the one I'm affiliated with up here, but you can have 501c6s, which in fact are the local chambers, and they're the ones that are anxious to coordinate the benefits of the program with their membership. And so I think that the 501c6s, for example, deserve more consideration, and they are nonprofits, because they're the ones that are on the ground in the local communities that can coordinate the application process, whatever goes on with their business membership. So would you care to comment on that?
Go ahead, Mr. Durrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess first to answer Senator Rothfuss's question, I actually don't have much view into what other programs might be available. So I've been focused solely on the business relief programs, not really much outside that, and I apologize. For Senator Coe, that's a fantastic question, and what I will say, and the way we looked at it, as well as the way we had heard it from some, and while many of them are definitely struggling, most of the C6s felt like well, I shouldn't say most, the ones that I talked with felt that their businesses in the primary were the primary givers of money to them, and those businesses around their communities, they wanted to make sure that they were taken care of first. So while you're right that they are struggling and they provide a valuable service, they also understand that the businesses that they represent in their communities are critical, and they need to be taken care of first. So, but thank you. I definitely see your point, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
good, very good discussion by the committee. Just be careful. I don't want to beat up on Mr. Durrell here. He's answering these questions very well. But if you recall, this committee failed to pass a specific amendment to include nonprofits. Okay. Then, if I recall the amendments that came through during the special session, the Senate, by one vote, I think, or two votes, failed to pass an amendment to specifically exclude nonprofits. And I think what we fell back to was the push to keep the Main Street businesses open to help them survive with this disaster relief. Our Main Street businesses was our focus, and that we were going to have to trust the rulemaking process to be able to get this rolled out quickly. Senator Rothfuss and Senator Coe, if that means that we have a gap that we need to fill, then this committee needs to take up that charge and do something about it, which we have the opportunity to try to do. But just, we put the business council in a tough spot because we didn't give clear guidance. And then we said, here, make some rules and hurry up, by the way, and get this money out to Main Street, Wyoming. So I just want to make sure we all kind of understand where we are.
I have a question. Where are you reading this that it's business only? I'm looking at Mr. Durrell's program here, and I don't see anything, but maybe I'm not on the right page.
Mr. Chairman, it's in the rules. It's not on any of the pages we see. I just read the rules.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Two things. First off, we have received a copy of this PowerPoint. It is now available on the meeting materials for this website. And then I also just emailed a link to the rules to the committee members.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Durrell, do you have more of your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, I do. Thank you for the questions, by the way. I really appreciate it. And thank you for addressing some challenges, no doubt about it. And we really do take those to heart. We want to execute as best we can. And we want to focus this program on those small businesses. And so I guess if we take a look again, I do feel a little funny walking you through this because you know it more than anyone. But again, just to say, when you passed the business relief programs, the governor signed those. And then on May 29th, our board adopted those rules. They have been approved by the Secretary of State, and they are now in the hands of the governor and the AG's office to make those final pieces in place to get those emergency rules going. As I mentioned before, this week, we're going to do educational webinars now. It's not just educational and telling people what those programs are, although that is really critical. We're also going to be walking them through how to determine grant amounts, eligibility, and making sure that they understand the application process, which is 100% online. It does not require any uploading of documentation, but it does require certification and them to certify on certain things, and lets them know that random audits are possible in the future. And then, as we mentioned, the rules for programs 2 and 3, which are sections 3 and 4 of 1004, will be targeted for early July timeframe. And Mr. Chair, I don't know if I saw a question there from Senator Coe or not, but was there a question? I just want to make sure that gets answered if necessary.
Senator Coe, is there a question? No.
My mistake. Thank you, sir. All right, so I think that covers the business relief programs. And again, we are focused, and to say 100% focused on that is it's probably not completely true. It's probably more like 99.5% focused on that, because it really has taken all of our efforts and all of our time for the last week and a half or so. And so we have been focused on that. But at the same time, we realize that this too shall pass, and we want to be prepared for the future. And so we are doing everything we can to continue to move forward with our strategy. And when I think about our strategy, I really think about how well it fits no matter the external environment. And so digging down into that and making sure that we're adding value to core industries, to making sure that we're activating new economic sectors, and that we are leveraging the partnerships that we have, not just with this group, but the larger group of legislators, and making sure that we build those bridges and partnerships throughout the state. They're incredibly important. And having that solid foundation in our strategy, really, a lot of times when a big crisis like this happens, people tend to kind of throw out the strategy and say, it's just not as important. Let's take a turn. And rather than that, what we've said is, let's make sure that we double down on our strategy. Let's make the most of our strategy. Before we go on, was there a question from the audience?
Greer, did you have a question?
I did, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry. I was just reviewing back the rules. The draft rules that we got the link to were for program 1. Is that correct? So then, to get back to Senator Coe and Senator Rothfuss's question, is that the rules on program 2 could be open to the 501c6s, which are like our chambers. is that being considered? I guess I want to just refine that particular question. And it was my understanding with a discussion with the governor's office is that there was a consideration for program 2 to be available for like the Chamber of Commerce's in a limited amount of nonprofits in that vein. Have you heard anything along those lines, Josh?
Thank you, Co-Chair Greer. I will have to dig in a little bit more on that. I haven't heard any specifics on that particular front. And again, part of this is just realizing that these programs do work together is important. But we've had an extreme focus on program 1 so that we can, work with speed and get this going. So that's a question that I will take down and make sure that it gets answered.
And so, Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's more of a comment for our committee, is that keep in mind program 1 was set up very quickly. And that's a quick hitter for those businesses that were either shut down or significantly impacted by business interruption with the health orders. Program 2 is going to be a little longer in the rulemaking process, and there probably is an opportunity to have further discussion with respect to the rulemaking on some of the issues that were brought up.
Okay, Josh, you want to go ahead?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yes. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I see Representative Ayer has a question after me as well. Mr. Chairman, Josh, I just want to follow up on what Chairman Greer was saying and ask the same thing for the third program where you've got some reimbursement for expenses related to COVID. I think there's this false belief that all we're talking about with nonprofits is organizations that send out flyers once a year begging for money. That's just not what we're talking about here. We've got a lot of healthcare related organizations that deal in revenue and expenditures, just like a for-profit corporation, but they don't file tax forms that are for-profit tax forms. They have other constraints on them. So we've ruled them out. They're not eligible for program 1, and unless we do something, they're also not eligible for program 3. And in fact, a lot of the time, they're the ones that are providing the frontline resources for a lot of what's happened with COVID. So if we've defied what is effectively, in my opinion, the will of the legislature on program 1, I'd like to at least see it respected on programs 2 and 3.
Representative Ayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to echo what Senator Rothfuss just iterated. I got to put on my old cooperative hat, rural electric cooperative hat, and they're part of these nonprofits as well. And I think they should be included in the direct COVID-related expense category, which is program 3. So I just echo what's been said already, that their nonprofits are excluded in 1, but we probably ought to think about getting them included in 1 and program 2 and 3. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and had a lot on my plate the last month. What Management Council did is, and so Representative Aaron Duncan will see this, is this issue of the nonprofits and the review of 1004 was assigned to the Corporations Committee to take a look at that. I don't know when corporations meets, but that's when some of that discussion will transpire at that time. I don't disagree with the comments of Senator Rothfuss, Representative Ayer. However, I do think that we can focus on program 2 and 3 separate and distinct from 1. But for whatever reason, that has been assigned to corporations to take a look at and sort through. And I think probably the reason on that is Management Council, Senator Rothfuss, maybe you can help me with my recollection, was they wanted us to focus on these energy issues before the next special session.
Well, Josh, I think you have it exactly right. I think level 1 should be for those small businesses, and then we can go from there. And if level 4 needs to be for nonprofits, that's fine. But I think you see part of the problem that we saw in the committee is all of a sudden you get into a whole bunch of different things like churches and all these other things. And we didn't have time to discuss it in level 1. So I think you're doing all right on level 1, but it needs more discussion on the other levels. So what else do you have, Josh? Any other questions for Josh before he goes on here? Okay, all right, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I definitely do appreciate all of those comments, and we will do our best to make sure that we try to include what we can. And I think that one of the keys is that it is not about that they're not deserving, and it's not about that they definitely don't need the help and are working hard. I think perhaps there will be other things that will show up to help them as well. So in the meantime, we'll continue down this path, taking those comments on the next 2 programs so that we can look at potentially including that. Thank you again for those comments. I think it is key. And again, as you mentioned, the discussion has centered mostly around the business relief programs, which is fitting because that is definitely what our attention has centered on, and what we do every day for the last few week and a half or 2 weeks, and we will continue to do until, as Representative Duncan said, until we far and wide spend all of this money on the businesses in Wyoming. So I hope that we can do that. So as we continue to move forward, though, we do have a strategic plan that has proven to be very solid, to be very useful, and is working in a way that strategic plan should. It should give you that long-term vision. It should be able to be adaptable for change. And we've been able to utilize this strategic plan in that way and feel solid about it. As we take a quick look at the 2020 key initiatives and really, looking at how do we bring this vision to life, we're going to talk with you about a few of those components, especially the industrial diversification, Team Wyoming, and our BRC refresh. So as we do that, I may bring in Ms. Sarah Fitzgerald, who's our Chief Strategy Officer, to provide some commentary as well. She is definitely the expert in our strategy and has been working very, very hard on that. And so with that, I might turn that over to Sarah for a little bit of discussion as well.
All right, good. Sarah?
Sure, and it won't let me start my my video, but thank you, Josh, and thank you, co-chairs. There we go. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so our 2020 key initiatives are really the things that we do to make our strategy go. And these 2020 key initiatives were established at the beginning of 2020. And as you all know, the world is very different now than it was at the beginning of 2020. And so what we've done over the past few months or weeks and months is really take a look at these and think about how should they be prioritized with the new environment that we in Wyoming and the world really lives in. And those 3 that Josh mentioned, the Industrial Diversification Program, Team Wyoming, and the BRC refresh, are really the ones that floated to the top as urgently important. Our strategy is really based around leveraging the strengths of Wyoming to diversify our economy, and it was built with a recognition that that we would see a downturn in our minerals economy, and what we've seen in the last few months is that kind of prediction, that expectation is here now, and it's worse than we thought it might be, and it's coupled with the COVID-19 crisis. And so what we realized is this industrial diversification program, which really aims to help the companies who serve the energy industry diversify their business models and their business plan, their revenue sources, is now urgently important. We need to help those oil field service companies. We need to help the other companies that serve our energy industry to find work in whatever markets they can, be that the aerospace industry, be that wind energy. We are looking to help them to diversify their business models and thereby diversify Wyoming's economy. The other initiative that we saw float to the top, really because of an opportunity that we see as the world changes, is our Team Wyoming initiative. This initiative is focused on creating strong partnerships across state agencies to recruit workforce and to recruit businesses. With the COVID-19 crisis, as we all are experiencing right now, remote work has become ubiquitous and familiar to a lot of people. And that really helps to level the playing field in many ways for Wyoming. You no longer have to be in a big city to be part of the tech industry. And so that has given many advantages to Wyoming that we haven't necessarily seen in the same way in the past. And so that has become now a front and center focus as well for the Business Council. The BRC refresh was important before and remains important now. What we're doing with BRC is working to make sure that we align it with our strategy, with our purpose of creating new opportunities for Wyomingites, and making sure that every single dollar that we spend in the Business Ready Community Program works toward that goal and is spent in the most efficient way to achieve that goal possible. With that, I'll just kind of leave it there with those very high level overviews, and I'll stand for questions if you have any about those initiatives. And we've got some more material and some discussion to have with you too.
Questions for Sarah. Questions for Sarah. Representative Furphy. Go ahead and turn your, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, let me ask about these initiatives. Wyoming always faces difficulty in attracting new business to our state. We've relied on years of our low tax base, but we found that doesn't work. So I think we've got to, if we're looking at high-tech businesses, trying to attract them to our state, we've got to sell them on our lifestyle that we've got here. So would you discuss what incentives you would try to put in place to attract a high-tech business to our state, just in generalities?
Yes, thank you, our Representative Furphy, Mr. Co-Chair. That's an excellent observation. And what COVID-19 has done for Wyoming is make it so that you can work anywhere. And so that provides more choice and freedom in where to work. And that means that lifestyle becomes even more important than it was before. And so that's really what this Team Wyoming initiative is focused around. We recognize that Wyoming's lifestyles is a huge, huge asset. It's something special that no other state has. So we're working with the Office of Tourism and using their That's Why campaign to try to help attract remote workers and attract other knowledge workforce to Wyoming. It's not necessarily incentives, but what this crisis has done is turn something that is an incentive for all of us. All of us know the benefits of living in Wyoming. It's turned this natural incentive into something that is really, really meaningful and valuable and tangible.
Other questions for Sarah? Other questions, other questions? Okay, back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll go ahead and move to this next area. And this is really something where I guess we're going to make an ask of the committee to help us out a little bit and really start to take a look at some of the barriers that we have to executing our strategy. And you know, whenever you look at something, and as I came into this role, I started to look at how do we effectively execute our strategy and what things are stopping us. And one of the questions that I had early on was, which program should we get rid of? And, you know, at first people kind of, you know, turn their head a little sideways and say, wait a second, what do you mean get rid of a program? And I say, well, we need to look at focusing in on the programs that have the most impact. And we need to make sure that our staff is focused directly in things that are going to actually make a difference, not just everything that we've always done and keep collecting programs. And so one of the things that we noticed is that we do have a number of programs that have been out there. And we also have a number of committees and boards that we're on and things like that, which sometimes can take away from the ability to get things done. And so it was in a discussion with another representative during this session, and we were talking about, you know, this was my first few weeks on the job, and talking about the number of boards and committees and things like that, and saying, hey, you know, he actually approached me and said, if you need help with understanding what those are and which ones are really going to make a difference, let me know so that I can help you. And if we need to get you off of some so that you can focus on the big task at hand, which is coming down the pike, and executing your strategy and working on diversification of our economy and making it stronger, please let me know. And this really got me thinking that, you know, there is a bit of inertia and a bit of problem with continuing to add on programs and add on boards and committees without taking something away. And that focus is really important. So one of the asks that I have of this committee is to work with us to perhaps shed some of these programs and work with us to ensure that we have the alignment and the effectiveness that we can have by helping us. Maybe we need to get off of some boards. Maybe we need to shed some programs that in the past might have worked well, but times have changed. And so we have been developing a list of those, and we will be coming to you with very specific asks of how to help us, again, focus in on that. Because we realize that we don't want to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we realize the staff that's just not going to happen given our outlook in terms of revenue. And so how do we do that? And how do we focus in on what's going to make the biggest difference? So we've gone through a process that will effectively give you information on which programs are effective, which ones match our strategy, and which ones have the potential to make a difference rather than just having them hang around. Because again, that inertia is bad organizationally. And so we're going to be asking about that. Before I move on, any questions there?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Representative Duncan.
Thank you. Josh, that is music to my ears. Thank you very much. I would love to see us move at the speed. You are a business entity, or even though you're in a government entity, you are a business organization. And my whole mantra is, I would love to see government move towards the speed of business rather than in the speed of red tape and mired in, you know, regulation. So the more you can streamline, and if it doesn't work and it doesn't need to be there and we're not using it, why are we there? So kudos to you, and the more we can do to help you with that, the better, because there's absolutely no reason for us to be having things there, because that's just the way we've always done it. Doesn't work, doesn't fly. We need, especially during this COVID situation and pandemic time, we've seen how many jobs can be done remotely, how many jobs can be removed, how many things can be done more efficiently. Look at how much money we're saving right now during these meetings by doing them remotely rather than having to go and travel across the state. Look at how much school districts have saved by doing different things. And I know that my particular school district is changing to where now when schools, they're even looking at a situation of when schools can't be in session because of weather, rather than having snow days, they're having remote days. So they will no longer have to go during the summer or extend their school year because of weather. So the more you can do to save money and the more you can do to eliminate programs that don't need to be there, the better. So that's fantastic. And so I would just really, really push and applaud you to do that, because I think the more of the mindset of that, the better these business relief programs can be done. And we can learn from all of these things to do even future programs of kind of cater them to other events. Because my idea is when we have these mines shut down, or the massive layoffs in the oil industry and all these different things, this is no different. Just because it's the COVID doesn't mean it's any different than the same kind of scenario across the state. So I would like us to see and look at the same kind of mentality or the same kind of program, but it's not COVID, but it's the same kind of idea moving forward to help the whole state. So I applaud if you would continue to look at ways that we can help our businesses and things long range. We're just setting up, it may not be the same funds, but we can set up the same kind of plan, idea, and protect and incentive and work for our businesses long term.
Wouldn't you agree?
Wouldn't you agree?
Chairman,
Josh.
thank you. It looks like Co-Chairman Greer has a question as well.
Oh, yes, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I too applaud, because this is a brave step, believe it or not. And not all members of the legislature are fans of the Business Council, and that's just a fact. But what I have seen over the years is the Business Council is so busy trying to hold its budget within its basic programs that it holds on to old concepts because they know they'll be able to get the funding there. And I think to take this step is brave. I think it's the right step to take. And you have to trust that if the legislature believes in economic development, that they'll fund economic development. And if they don't, as a whole, they're going to shut it down anyway. And a good example of this was several years ago, there was an opportunity up in Cody that Senator Coe had brought forth, and we reinvigorated the Amendment 4 process and put $20 million into that particular fund. Now, the project in Cody didn't go through, but it helped fund a couple of other projects. There has been the majority support for the Business Council. And so I think to be brave and forward thinking is the right path. You will net better results. And the more results you net, the more support you can end up getting.
Any other comments? Hearing none. Go ahead, Josh Durrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your comments as well, Representative Duncan and Mr. Chairman Greer. I really appreciate that, and that is exactly what we want to do. Is we want to be lean and mean. We want to do things that work, and we want to build trust within the legislature so that we can continue to do that work and again get behind programs that work, not just get behind programs that save budgets. So thank you very much for those comments. One of the other things that we noticed as well, and we're noticing it very clearly, if there is a silver lining to a pandemic, it's that it demonstrates some really pretty dramatic cracks in things that otherwise are standing. And one of the things that we realize is that at a local level, the communities are not as willing or able or prepared to handle some of these challenges. And And so I know that there are some communities around the state who have very strong economic development organizations. I know that there are some communities around the state who have put some of these things into place. But I do think that we need to really explore how to almost have statewide local capacity, if that makes any sense. And what I mean by that is making sure that each of the communities throughout the state can effectively use the tools that might be in front of them, and leveraging this particular crisis in order to get everyone on board, I think is really, really important. I think it would be a waste if we did not galvanize everyone and really show all of the tools that are available to them and can be used so that they are not in this situation where they're caught behind the times, if you will. And so, there are many opportunities from planning grants and programs, EDA grants, the Quarterson Economic Development Tax, the Challenge Loan programs. There are many programs that really communities just, the Business Council needs to do a much better job of educating. But I also think it goes to what some folks have said, kind of like boots on the ground and their representatives and senators making sure that they're trumpeting the tools that these communities have, because no matter what our budget is at the Business Council, it's not as great as what the entire state could put together and what each of these communities could put together. And as the Business Council, we want to be facilitating those efforts, but we know we can't be driving them. Each of those local communities needs to do that. And so us helping those communities understand what is their plan, what is their vision for the future for their community, and how are they going to go about that? We can facilitate that, but it really takes money in those communities. It also takes those communities, saying to themselves, we have to define this and we have to move forward. What are the tools? And it becomes that collaboration of the entire state. There are pockets within this state of economic developers who have been in other places, and they understand the tools that are available out there from the federal government, in other states, and how to use those. And so helping to expand that across the state is a real critical thing. And I think right now it's a bit of a barrier because, or at least maybe it would have been a few months ago. Now I think it's very obvious to these communities what needs to happen. And we want to be there to help them make it happen. It's obviously something that we feel like this committee could help us do. But that's a key component, is increasing those the local communities and providing them the tools that they need to really do it on their own. And again, I think what it does is it allows us to stay lean and mean and not get bloated, and really work hard to extend our toolkit to those communities rather than budget and manpower. I'll stop there for a moment if there are any other questions or comments. Mr. Chairman, I think you were muted.
Yeah, I am. Is there any questions? Any questions? Any comments, questions? Nope. Go ahead, Josh.
Thank you. And one of the final items, and this is again, it's a little bit ironic talking about this third bullet when we are working on increasing the usability and speed of a grant program, and in a very short time frame. Thank you to this committee first and foremost for that. We are, with the business relief program, we're able to show that we can be effective in a short amount of time and efficient. But one of the things that we have been challenged with is the Business Ready Communities grant program and loan program. It can be a little bit slow and it can be a little bit cumbersome. And so we are exploring ways to make that much more effective, to make it maybe faster and more efficient, and really try to, if that program needs to morph a bit to better suit the needs, as maybe, Representative Furphy mentioned about attracting new technology companies, not just with Lifestyle and Team Wyoming, but with the grant program that fits them better. We want to explore that. And we know that has been a fantastic program over the years, but we want to really find some ways to make it more efficient and effective and speedier for to bring businesses in and help businesses grow within Wyoming.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll keep on going. So when we look at new opportunities that are out there, we really do see especially with some of the new economic sectors, I think that this crisis has really driven some new opportunities for us. And as we've all mentioned, and I think it was Representative Duncan talking about how this crisis has really changed the way people work, I think we see it as a level playing field, and we can now utilize our lifestyle to attract talent, to attract businesses, now that people know that, hey, I can actually work remotely for a number of months, and I can be just as effective, if not more effective, from wherever I want to be. We have had a number of companies and individuals call us and say, I am moving to Wyoming, I'm moving my small company, or at least the headquarters, and we're going to have some people that work remote, but we are going to move away from the rat race and really look at a place like Wyoming as a place to be, because we know now that we can do this. And so we want to leverage that and continue that. And I think that goes to our Team Wyoming concepts. And when it comes to collaboration, we are seeing better collaboration with legislature. We are seeing better collaboration with other agencies. And we are seeing communities within Wyoming be very open and direct with each other about which businesses should go where and how this can work. And I think that we need to continue to leverage this particular crisis to make sure that we don't forget all of that collaboration. And Chairman Greer mentioned that not everybody thinks highly of or is fully supportive of the Business Council, and I take that as a fact and a challenge that we can continue to work hard. And I think that this crisis has given us an opportunity to help businesses throughout the state and to show that we're a good use of funds, and we're a good efficient use of our resources in the state. And I think that collaboration really will continue on. And so I look forward to more collaboration. I think it's one of those things where, perhaps had this been a normal situation, it might take months or years to accomplish what we're talking about. But we've been put in the pressure cooker, and we see it as a great opportunity. And I guess what I would say to the group here is that we see all of these things not as challenges, not the declining revenue and the COVID crisis and all of this, not as challenges, but as opportunities for us to continue to really enact what this committee would like to see and what the governor's office would like to see. And with that, what I would say is I would like to open it up for discussion. And really, as we were talking with members of the committee on what we wanted to talk about and what we wanted to get out of this meeting, what I really felt strongly about is that there are a bunch of really smart people with a lot of experience and a lot of really expertise on this committee, and we would be fools not to leverage it. And so one of the things that I really want to make sure that we do today and in the future is, in the spirit of collaboration, I'd like to have a discussion to understand what's going on in your communities, to understand some of the ideas that you might have to make us more efficient and effective. I'm open to all of those things and looking at what are the successes that your businesses or your communities have had, and how do we help leverage that across the state? We have representation of people from all over the state in this virtual room, if you will. And how do we make sure that what is a shining star in one part of the state gets extended to all of the rest? So those are the things that I would like to, if we could, have an open discussion on. I'd like to be a sponge and soak it all in and engage in that discussion and again, really learn from the brains on this committee. Thank you.
Well, with all those compliments and all that, I'm sure every one of you wants to talk and tell him all about your community. So who's going to go first? Burkhart? No? Oh, Greer's going to go first. Okay.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to go first because I could go on and on about my community. I think though, Josh, in maybe the interest of time, and is, you know, what I'd be willing to do is grab my county commissioners and our CDO and their board and just set up a meeting in the very near future so that we could talk to the members of the Business Council about Washakie County, what drives our county. You know, we're unique and yet we're similar to many of the other counties in the state. And I suspect that everybody sitting in this meeting today would say the very same thing about the areas that they represent. And I think that type of outreach, I'd be more than happy to take some of my time to do that, to generate some ideas. Quite frankly, we created 3 jobs in Washakie County in the next 6 months. I'd be happy. So that's just where we're at.
Anybody else like to pile on? Yes, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. Myself, we are one of the unique counties considering we are the only one that has a tax for our economic development. So I think we would be more than happy to sit down and visit as far as our commissioners, as well as our economic development group. And I think we would give a completely different perspective than all the other counties combined. But I think it's one of those things that we need to sit down and visit individually, county by county, because I think you're going to be overwhelmed with the amount of information you're going to get, the different ideas you're going to get, and the different good ideas and the different pitfalls, you know, and issues. So I just think that it's one, you're pretty inundated right now with what's going on with the program getting, you know, released. But I think this is definitely something that previous counties in the past, I know my county in the past has reached out and tried to have this sit down and has been rejected. So it's very refreshing to have this reach out from you, coming from you directly. So it's, thank you. And we'd be more than happy to sit down with you.
Anyone else? Anyone else? I'm sure you'd like to make the tour around all the counties. I know Natrona County would be happy to discuss what's worked for us. Anyone else? Anyone else? Representative Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as always in our county, the big issue is we've got to find jobs for these college graduates. And I look at this current situation as maybe a great opportunity because these kids that are coming out are smart and hardworking. As we've placed them in companies across our country, they love to hire Wyoming graduates. But in this economic environment, they're probably not going to hire many of our graduates. So I think it's something we should think about and get creative with. I'm thinking Senator Rothfuss worked very hard on blockchain technologies. And so I'm just saying, let's see what we can do to try to keep more of our college graduates here. So I just pass that on. Don't have a solution, but pass it on.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. All right, Josh, you got what you're going to get.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all, and maybe let the road tour begin, right? So that'll be great. We do have some other business to attend to in terms of our economic disaster loans, and with that, I will introduce Josh Keefe, who's our finance manager, and I believe you've all heard from him many times before. But here is Josh to talk through the economic disaster loans. Josh, would you like me to go to the next slide?
Yes, please. All right. Chairman Anderson, Chairman Greer, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity today. I know in the past, Representative and Chairman Greer and I had talked about a little bit of these economic disaster loans that reside at the Business Council. This pot of money all sits in the revolving loan fund that is commonly referred to as the Challenge Loan Fund at the Business Council. That fund has been used to do bank participations around the state for the last 21 years. You know, having state money out roughly in the neighborhood of $35 million over that time frame on projects about 72 million total. But more specific to the economic disaster loans, there have been 7 disaster declarations in the last 21 years. Most of them have dealt with either in some fashion an agricultural loss, either directly or indirectly. And so that's typically the way that it's been used. This, like I said, this money sits in the Challenge Loan Program along with 6 others. And over the last 20 years, we've closed 214 of these loans for just over $17.2 million. In one of the last rounds that we had, when we do these loans, the goal is to really help producers make it to the next year. If they have a big loss, we would like to give them a loan where they can revolve their operating line at the local bank, and then the bank would be willing to renew the line for another year, and we can spread that loss over up to a 10-year period. That way, the producer can keep operating as planned. We don't get in the way of their ongoing relationship with the existing banks that they have in that relationship. And so, but one of the challenges that we have is that we don't have a lot of teeth really to collect on these payments. Yes, I make numerous phone calls, emails, just like a normal bank officer would to collect these payments, but sometimes it gets a little challenging. We have not had many charge-offs specifically with this program. We've had 7, all due to bankruptcy filings by the producers. And so that's one of the challenges with the economic disaster loans, is really just trying to give the Business Council maybe a little more power to try and collect that money. Again, not that I want to be a collector, but it is important to understand that these folks understand that it's money that's not free, and that you know, we're using these funds to help them out, and that it's owed back to ultimately the taxpayers. And so, you know, there's also we in this discussion talking about you know, trying to create more jobs in Washakie County and trying to help grads stay here in the state, and empowering local economic development organizations and communities. That also leads exactly into some other programs that specifically in the Challenge Loan Program that I'd love to change and add. For example, you know, one of the struggles is business succession around the state. I think we're all well aware that we live in an older state, and that many of those business owners retire, but they don't necessarily have the ability to pass on their businesses to a manager or somebody else that might be interested in continuing it. And if that business employs 6 people in a small town, that's a big deal. And so, you know, banks aren't necessarily able to always help in those situations because they're ruled by federal lending laws and all kinds of things. But there are certain programs that I think that we can help continue that business succession, keep people here, and quite frankly, can have a direct effect in keeping the vitality of a community going. So with that, I just wanted to give you a brief little update, just a little history on economic disaster loans and the other challenge loan things going on. But maybe, again, might be looking for some help to try and make things more effective, hearing all of the comments from the other members of the committee here. So thanks.
Josh, I'm sure we do have some questions. I'm looking at this list, and if I look at Fremont County and Wind River mushrooms, the business was closed, and all we charged off was $25,000. Yet there was a $3.3 million loan and a challenge loan of $250,000. How do we just get a charge off of $25,000? Got another one on the next page there in Goshen County, $5 million, $500,000 in challenge loan for Heartland Composites in Torrington, and we only charged off $78,000. I'm kind of surprised at how little amount we charged off, or is charged off a different deal.
Yeah, Chairman Anderson. So yes, what happens is when we do those bank participations, those two specific instances are different than economic disaster loans. Those are part of the participation program we do with local lenders. The goal of that program is to help share the risk and perhaps do a project that the bank may view as a little more on the edge. And so they would like someone to share that risk with. So in regards to your question on the little amount that's been charged off, yes, a lot of times we'll put $500,000 into the project. The loan performs for a number of years, paying down accordingly. And then what happens then is, if a business is in trouble and they decide to close their doors, and the bank is in charge of liquidating all of the assets or the collateral that's pledged to the loan. And then if there is a loss, we will take we, as in the Business Council's loan fund, will take our prorated amount of that loss. So if we were in it for 20% and there was $100,000 loss, we would take a $20,000 loss on that. I think the goal being that, hopefully you've made up enough in interest income to offset that loss ultimately, but that, just acting as, the goal obviously is to make more money than you have to charge off, which we've been able to do for the last 20 plus years. So.
I also saw on next page is about 4 or 5 pages down, economic disaster loan program. In 2017, there was $6,364,000, and then it goes over and there's no explanation of anything except the beet growers. Looks like the beet growers beat us out of $6 million.
If you're referring to the master schedule there is no comment, and so I guess there haven't been. I guess I don't know what you're asking exactly. So
well, every other one has a comment in it, and that one doesn't have a comment. It's real obvious. There's no comment for it. What's the deal with that?
Sorry, I don't know exactly which one, but we have charged off one loan from that section or from that issuance of economic disaster loans. All the rest of them have been paying as agreed. And so, sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, right what you're asking, but we've had one that we've had to charge off again, because that borrower filed bankruptcy, but the rest have been paying as agreed. So
yeah, that charge off was a beet grower also, but you only charged off $18,000. So, okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions for the loan program?
Yep, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So, one of the things, and Josh, we can maybe we can suggest setting up a subcommittee to work on this. But that 2017 set of loans, some of those went to growers for the company I took over in March after that disaster had occurred. And then also for growers in the northern part of Wyoming that delivered a Western sugar cooperative. And it was a weather-related event that affected the processing of sugar beets. It didn't carry down in, I think, Goshen County. Those growers had applied for it, but their losses couldn't be tied directly to that same weather event. So that's where those come out of. The charge-off that Mr. Keefe is talking about is one that we discussed and one I'm familiar with, and one that kind of started our discussion. And as he said earlier, these loans, especially in the area of agriculture, come around to, quite frankly, providing cash flow to be able to get the next year's crop in the ground. And these loans have been successful in, but we have dry beans in several different counties around the state. We had something with alfalfa seed that was absconded with fraud. We've had a couple incidences with sugar beets throughout the years where these have stepped in and been helpful. The one case that out of that 17 group that is a little bit troubling, and where I think we need to look at some legislative reform, is that the grower was obviously in a cash flow crunch, as many were. And with the economic disaster relief came in, and basically, while there's security, the security is nearly worthless. I think we can agree. Josh, could you shake your head yes, that you would agree with that?
Yes.
And so then what it allows is for cash flow to be able to get the next crop in the ground and still not affect the operating lines of the producers with their underlying banks. With the one that was charged off, where this was troubling, is that Josh worked that loan, communication with the underlying bank. When those funds came in, that bank used those funds to offset other obligations and clean up their file. Didn't issue the operating line to the producer, and he was not able to put his crop in the ground, and as a result filed for bankruptcy. The complete opposite of the purpose of these loans. And so I think we need to work on one, some underlying collateral issues or ideas that might help in the case of bankruptcy. These are subordinated mortgages on real estate, so that if there's a bankruptcy and there is money coming out the other side, that you're something more than an unsecured creditor getting pennies on the dollar. The other component of it is that while they're not a participating bank, they are still the primary lender for the producer, but they basically certify that these funds will go towards operating costs for the coming year. So those are just two ideas that I have to help make this program function the way it's supposed to. One bad set of facts can get you thinking on what you can do to make the program better. And Josh, I don't know if you want to comment any further on that. I know you and I had a specific discussion about this situation.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Greer. Really, the hard part about that situation that Chairman Greer just discussed was that, before taking this role that I'm in now, I worked in the private banking sector for almost a decade, and I was very disappointed by what happened in the way that it was handled. And so it gave me a little less faith in my fellow bankers to do the right thing. And so I think that that's really the crux of why this needs to change a little bit and give the business council the ability to take more security on a loan and more collateral if that were to happen again. again, in there, like I said, this is not the norm, but there are those circumstances that happen, and it leaves the business council maybe a little powerless sometimes to do much about it. So.
Okay. Okay. Moving right along. We've got a deadline.
So, Mr. Co-Chair, on this,
Yes.
this particular issue is, and I didn't know, and I realized Mr. Keith's been busy otherwise last month, like the rest of us, but I would maybe propose that you and I set up a subcommittee to maybe look at some recommendations from the Business Council. Look at, and I think there's 7 programs in the whole challenge loan. Is that correct? And maybe look at what we might do to still make it a very flexible and workable program, but guard against maybe these unfortunate situations that can crop up and close some of the holes.
Yes, Chairman Greer, I think that would be a great idea. So.
Okay, we'll look into that. Okay, Josh Keefe, are you finished with your presentations?
Yes, sir. That's all that is from me. So thank
Okay,
you.
All right. All right. Next is Ron Goldberg. Is that correct?
There, I'm unmuted, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you.
There you go.
I don't think I have video capability though. Oh, here we go. There you go. Good afternoon. Thank you. I don't have a lot to add. I just appreciate all the comments from start to finish, and we do send every press release, every message to the legislature. So if you're not seeing those and you're not seeing them in your spam, please reach out directly to me. We want to get that corrected, and we will continue to work with partners. We're going to have some training webinars and use their databases to get the message out about this program, and leave no stone unturned. So that's about all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Goldberg? Any questions for Mr. Goldberg? Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Any questions for the Joshes? No more questions for the Joshes? Well, the Joshes are going to get out early then. Get right on their next project, huh? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you to the Wyoming Business Council for a great presentation and great information. And we appreciate what you're doing and getting these things done for the businesses in Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this, on the Wyoming Business Council? Any public comment? Any public comment on the Business Council information? Hearing none, we'll close public comment. And we have one other issue to deal with. Representative Burkhart, are you gonna?
Mr. Co-Chair?
Oh, yes, Representative Greer.
Yeah, if I might, because we were trying to push through, get the Business Council to their hard stop, is maybe circle back with the committee on ideas. This is technically our first meeting, but I guess it's really not. It's like our third. But any ideas that the committee may have regarding our earlier discussion this morning that may tie into maybe what Representative Burkhart has in mind. And then I also, while we're at that point of business, is I would like to try to, seems how you're chairing today though, but I'd like to get us a subcommittee to work with Josh Keefe regarding some statutory revisions in a little closer look with maybe something we can bring back to the committee at our August meeting that's a little more substantive on some changes to these programs.
And who would you like to have on that committee besides you?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I will volunteer for it. I know on the House side, we've got a couple of bankers. Yeah, I know Senator Rothfuss is swamped. So I don't know, Senator Coe is looking at, he's trying to ride off into the sunset, but he would be a valuable member of that. So I don't, I guess I'll volunteer for it, and probably we pick up 1 or 2 or 3 more people would be a real good idea.
Would it be good to have a banker like Representative Furphy?
Yeah. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'd agree to that.
And he's volunteering. So you have 2, and then you have Josh Keefe. So there's 3, and you got Senator Coe. Are you wanting to comment, or you want to volunteer?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I've got a little bit of a banking background as well. I would volunteer to serve on that.
Good, good.
So then, Mr. Chairman, what I'll do, so that's Representative Furphy, Greer, and Senator Coe. And we'll let Josh catch his breath a little bit, but we'll try to get a meeting set up here in about 2 weeks, maybe, Josh, and just have a little more discussion about what you're thinking, and we'll work from there.
Okay, and you think you're going to do that on Zoom, I'm assuming?
Yeah, if Senator Coe's comfortable with that, I've actually become, for small meetings, that's works pretty well, I think.
Okay. All right, good. So be it. So be it. Do we need anything else before we hear from Representative Burkhart? No? Okay, Representative Burkhart, let's hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I would ask Brian Fuller to send out that document so people have something to look at. Brian, can you do that?
I think if we're getting that this late in the game, we probably just should have you explain what it is, and we hit it harder the next meeting, huh?
Yeah, I can do that, Mr. Chairman. I just thought everybody would have something in front of them to write on and scribble on and that sort of thing. What it is would be a proposed bill draft to assist some of these larger companies that have kind of fallen through the cracks on a lot of this stimulus. We have a number of companies in Wyoming who have kept things going, who have kept operations going, and have really taken a hit out of the COVID economy. So I'll just go through my concept in general, which is to give them some relief or stimulus based on either or their payroll size, based on their payroll numbers, or their property tax, with stipulations in there that look very, very much, well, identical actually, with a few exceptions to Section 3 out of 1004. And it would allow the larger companies on a property tax, if they pay more than $1 million a year in real property tax, they have a building, they have land, equipment that they're paying property tax on, or more than $10 million in payroll. The $10 million in payroll works out to be about 250 employees based on the average payroll in Wyoming. So that's where the numbers come from. The amount they would be eligible for would be 25% of either their payroll or their property tax from 2019, up to $1.5 million to help them through the reduction in production, revenue, all of that. And an appropriation, total appropriation to the project of $10 million. And that's kind of it in a nutshell, with all the caveats that were in Section 3 from 1004 of it's used for payroll, it's used for rent or mortgage, all of those, if you remember all of those. So that's the general concept as it stands. And I'd be glad to discuss questions.
Senator Representative Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Representative Burkhart, So looking at this, so there's a couple things. One is if this is going to do any good, we probably need to address this sooner rather than later with this committee, because if there, and I think it's still up in the air whether or not we're going to have a special session at the end of June. But if we do, or assuming that we do, we need to have this bill ready. Otherwise, it's not going to do any good to look at it in our August meeting. The second component of this, from what I heard, at least from the Sinclair testimony today, was would we not want to, isn't this to help those businesses that were not eligible for PPP?
Mr. Chairman, correct. If you look at the sideboards on it, it would be those companies who were not eligible for PPP for a variety of reasons. For those companies who got nothing out of the CARES Act, and generally come down to some of our larger companies, and I'll use Sinclair as an example. They've kept all of their employees working through all of the past few months. Things are starting to pick up, but there were no purposeful layoffs. They frankly kept the economy, I think, of my district and all of Carbon County going. With 500 employees making very good money, the company itself has taken a pretty big hit in the name of taking care of their employees and the community. And that the overall, in talking to the Department of Revenue, looking at the property tax numbers, the estimate is probably on the high end, 30 companies would qualify for the program. Probably less, but that's just to give a maximum amount.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
Yeah, so, looking at the bill draft you sent, Representative Burkhart, we've got eligible business. It's on page 6, starting on line 11. Wouldn't we need to put in there, we're not eligible, did not receive PPP dollars, did not receive any payments from the CARES Act? I mean, those are the types of sideboards we need to add to such a bill draft.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Representative Burkhart.
Mr. Chairman, if you go over to, it is in there, and I'm trying to find the exact page. This has been a work in progress.
Mr. Chairman, if I can help.
Yes.
It should be on page 13, lines 8 through 13.
Page 13, line 8 through 13, does that put the sideboards on it well enough for you?
Okay, yeah, structure's not that well. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, is, I guess one of the issues that this committee has to decide is whether or not we want to look at this program.
And I'm thinking we want to look at it, but we need a little more time to look at it. And I don't think it's emergent. I don't think these companies, these are larger companies that have a annual budget and that kind of stuff, and they're not like a small business that would drop and go bankrupt immediately because they don't have any funds. So I'm not as worried about pushing this quickly as I was with section 1 of the 1004. So I think we ought to look at it. I think it bears some, but I don't know that we have to do it immediately. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree to disagree. I think that we need to look at it because tomorrow is our last meeting before the end of the month. So if we're going to try and help this business, these businesses who were actually doing the right thing and helping our employees and such. I think we need to move on this and help those that we can before the end of the month, because if we have a special session, we need to be prepared to move, because this would definitely fall into the second thing second to help those employers who are, especially these in particular that are our energy industry. And that's one of the priorities that we have right now, is that we're talking and addressing our energy industry. So if we can help our energy industry, then I think we really need to really look at this and push it.
Okay, any other comments? Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, just on that as well, is that this would be funded with CARES Act dollars. I don't know where we're going to be with those dollars. I hate to say it, but first up, first in time, first in right.
Representative Crank.
Yes, I'm a little confused to Representative Burkhart. Where does this fall with the level 3 funding that we set up earlier? What's the difference? Because we basically said, send in your receipts and we'll pay you. So what is the difference we're looking at here?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, the difference is that Section 3 covered those safety and health and security issues dealing with COVID, having to buy masks, suits, disinfecting equipment, hiring additional employees. This helps them through the times when they have other expenses. They lost a lot of their production. They weren't in any of the categories that we've talked about before. Their production is down, their productivity is down, and they weren't, it wasn't addressed by anything else. So that's the big difference, is that while they could also use this money for those things that were described in Section 3 of 1004, it also allows them to cover other things such as, and I'm looking for the exact page. Hang on, give me just a second. As usual, you can't find something when you want it. But things such as payroll, it's on page 9, business supplies, equipment, including necessary to remain normal business operations, other business expenses, mortgage payments, utilities, other expenditures related to business interruption due to COVID-19. And one of the let me go a little further. One of the other stipulations is that they have to keep at least 95% of their payroll employed for the next 3 years. The reason for the 95% is that these large companies constantly have employees who will leave for a variety of reasons. They hire new employees. So if you had, say, I'm picking a number, 100 employees and one left and was gone for 3, now you've dropped off to 100%. So that was the reason for a little bit of leniency there, was to allow them time to hire employees and keep their staffing up. But I would say we need to move on this fairly soon in case we do have a second session, a second special session, the end of the month. And yes, it's already the end of the month that it would be happening.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to agree with the timing, as was mentioned earlier by Representative Duncan, in terms of opportunity and what we lose if we don't decide what we want to do. My question has to go to the, if you could, do you have some examples of actual businesses who would fall into this category, and having that, would you have an idea whether the 10 million that looks like that's the figure is going to be even adequate? I think the chairman, co-chairman made a good point about we don't know where the dynamics are as far as the actual amount left in terms of the rollout of the funds that are going to be allocated. But I'm just asking, do we have some examples? Do we know if there's some candidates that would fit this, that we actually would want to target and try to help? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things on that. One of the largest real property taxpayers who pay real property tax in the state, it's about $7 million a year, would probably be one of the biggest beneficiaries. And then it goes down from there. And one reason was the larger companies generally have more property, but also there are companies in Wyoming who have quite a few employees who really don't have real property, so to speak. And that was the reason to give them the option if they did not have the opportunity to take part in PPP. And what comes to mind are some of the larger construction companies who are doing our highways and roads and a lot of the building that is going on in the state and hopefully will continue, who may have taken a hit due to the COVID virus. So those would be some of the ones. We cannot write special legislation, and this was not intended to be special legislation for any one industry or company or group. That's why, like I said, there'll be approximately, I've estimated, along with the Department of Revenue, somewhere 30 companies in the state would be able to take part in this. If you look at companies with 500 or less employees in the state, that's almost all of the companies. There are only just over 250 companies, private companies in Wyoming, who have more than 100 employees. We don't have a lot of huge manufacturing companies or any other companies. So that's about where it would fall.
Other questions for the maker? Other questions for the maker? Yes, Senator Coe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm just curious as well. And I haven't had a chance to read the whole bill. I looked at pieces of it, but do you differentiate in here from companies that are publicly traded from private companies, or can you answer that for me?
Mr. Chairman, let's see, back over to, it's under the criteria, and I don't have the bill memorized. Hang on just a second. So it would be pretty much the same criteria with some modifications that we had in 1004, which is paid not less than $1 million in taxes assessed on real property in 2019 or $10 million in payroll in 2019, has its principal operations located in Wyoming, and employed not less than 100 full-time employees. So it's the same criteria we had used in 1004, that is a Wyoming company and has its is independently owned and operated, established prior to the COVID orders and those other criteria. So it's pretty much the same criteria we used before. It wouldn't differentiate between a publicly traded company and an independent or proprietorship, regardless of size, other than the criteria already mentioned.
Other questions? Other questions? Representative Ear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Burkhart, could you explain, I don't find the reference here. On page 13, line 15, says the stipends will not be reduced based on any amounts that an eligible business has received from any of the programs established under the special session. Is that help me understand that. Does that mean that they could double dip? Be reimbursed twice for the same expense?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Burkhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, not necessarily. What it means though is that section 3 in 1014 could be used for those safety items. And this bill could be used for lost production, productivity, revenues. So that one doesn't exclude the other, but they do work separately.
Other questions?
Well,
yeah.
So are there provisions that prohibit them from being reimbursed for the same expense twice in the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be based on the rules established. The bill was written so that they weren't precluded and had to make a choice between one or the other. And the bill was drafted relatively late last week. In fact, the copy you have in front of you, Brian was good enough to get that done for me this morning. So I haven't had a chance to do an in-depth red line of it yet. Maybe all of you could help me do that.
Senator Rothfuss, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Burkhardt, I was looking at paragraph 5 on page, I think it's 10. Paragraph 5 on page 10, which kind of talks about some of the eligibility requirements in terms of lost revenue. And I have two questions. The first is on line 14. It talks about to be eligible, you've got a single month of lost sales. And I'm not even entirely sure which month for sure. Maybe it was back above somewhere. But line 14 talks about having a 25% decrease for one single month, then makes you eligible. But then the total amount of money you receive is based on 25% of effectively a 3-year period of time or an entire year's payroll. So I'm a little curious at how one justifies the other. I mean, it seems like you would have to demonstrate the entire 25% of payroll or the entire, in other words, something that's comparable. And I'll stop there. I'll ask that question, then I'll ask my second one.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Senator, that's one of the issues I think we need to work out here in the committee. It was a little tough to compare the last 2 months, for example, to the previous 3 years. And I realize it's not clear which month it is. I would say it would be the months of April and May of 2020 would compare to the months of April and May in 2019, or even a 3-year average of 2017, 18, and 19. But it was to compare months because of the issue of, the great loss of production just in a relatively short period of time. And I think Brian can help me with that one too.
Brian, you got your hand up. You ready?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, the idea, the direction and the idea behind that language was that, if a business showed losses for April, May, and June, then those would be measured against the corresponding sales revenue production for those 3 months of 2019.
So, Mr. Chairman, to follow up on that with Brian, are those 3 months referenced static somewhere? I just see for the same month in 2019, and maybe I'm missing it. Again, I haven't read the whole bill. So,
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, they are not referenced elsewhere.
Okay, so
I think what we're hearing is we need time to look at this bill just a little bit. We have 2 questions. Do you want to pursue it? And the second question is, do you want to pursue it overnight and get something done tomorrow? So the first question is, do you want to pursue this bill? Everybody raise your hand if you want to pursue the bill. Seven. Raise your hand if you don't want to pursue the bill. 7-2. It wasn't really conclusive. Wasn't very conclusive, but you did say you wanted to pursue the bill. Okay, now do you want to pursue it tomorrow morning? You want to read it tonight and pursue it tomorrow so it's ready to go for that next meeting? So everybody who wants to pursue it tomorrow morning, raise your hand.
I get it.
9, and if you don't want to pursue it tomorrow, raise your hand. 4. So we're gonna pursue it, and we're gonna pursue it tomorrow. So you got tonight to read this bill and have your questions ready for Representative Burkhart tomorrow.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
So kind of maybe what I trying to think on process here just a little bit is tomorrow afternoon we should have some time on the agendas. Maybe we want to do that and I work the bill. So we have the work share bill tomorrow, which will be a draft that's going to get rolled out by our subcommittee, which isn't probably completely going to be able to be worked. If that makes sense.
It's in pretty good shape.
Okay. A little bit of my thoughts are, and I think we've got a couple other bill drafts we may want to ask of LSO Day. I know I've got 2 more I want to look at that comes out of our discussion this morning. And it is, if Management Council decides on, and we get direction from our leadership regarding a special session, is we may have to do another half day or maybe even longer of a minerals meeting and bring these bills back and work them the proper way. I think the real question for the committee was, do we want to help and do a small pot of money for some of these larger businesses that did not receive PPP. They didn't receive any other funding under the CARES Act directly from the federal government, that they're significant taxpayers and employers in the state of Wyoming. We heard from one today. We heard from Sinclair, been in the state for well over a century. There are probably a few more, like the small coal mine over by Kemmer, that's probably going to fall into this group. There's a few along those lines that will be available, but I think we have to be very careful on how we sculpt this. And we're going to catch 10, 15 businesses with it. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, I know you're gone tomorrow afternoon, but maybe when we get through our agenda, because the people who are all scheduled to testify, to try to stay on that out of respect to their time, to review this tonight, get some ideas. Maybe Representative Burkhart, you can work it with some of the committee members. And then we can see if we want to move it and work it tomorrow and do it in that fashion. Is that, Mr. Chairman, does that sound okay or sound like a plan?
Well, if we're going to have more bills, I think we probably are going to have another session to work those bills. I don't think we can get them done for the special session, if you will.
Yeah.
If you don't.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we direct LSO to prepare a bill draft regarding severance tax relief. And if I can get a second on that, I could expand on that just a little bit more.
Seconded by Crank.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, what I would like to do is look at sales tax relief regarding, I kept saying drilling earlier, but I meant production, severance tax relief. And what I would like to propose is a 50% reduction in severance tax for a 6-month period that has to be taken in consecutive 6 months. it has to be utilized within 1 year of the price of oil hitting $45. And the reason why I have that floor there is I think we all agree price is the driver here. Once the price comes up, then how do we incentivize or encourage production to start back up in the state of Wyoming? So I'll say that again. Once the price of oil hits $45, that we offer a 50% reduction in severance tax for 6 months, but it has to be utilized in consecutive months, and it has to be utilized within 1 year of oil hitting a price of $45. That's just in concept. Can't hear you, Chairman Anderson.
That hits the issues I'd like to hit, and that is that it's controlled by the price of the product, and that it's terminal also, that it only has a certain time frame to operate in, and then it's gone. And I think those guys can make that work like that too. So any other direction to LSO for this bill draft? And are you going to look at this tomorrow too, or what are you going to do? No, yeah, we'll have to.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I think we're a little bit in limbo. This is all driven about if we go back into special session, because I think this is the type of legislation that we're going to want to have in place this summer, one way or the other. At least I hope oil prices rebound sometime in the end of the third, somewhere in the fourth quarter. So I guess what we do is get the bill draft put together. If we are called back into special session, then this committee, we're going to have to ask for another meeting to work a couple of these bills.
Okay. All right. I think that makes sense. Anything else? Anything else to come with the Senator Wasserberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of clarification on Representative Burkhart's bill. What LSO number is that? So I read the right one. I know I've already read it.
20 LSO 0735, working draft number 4.
Thank you.
Anything else come before the committee?
Question on my motion for bill draft.
Oh, I thought we did that.
I don't recall.
Okay, there's a motion on the table to have a bill draft for what tax is it? Severance tax?
It has to be severance.
Severance. All in favor, raise your right hand or your left hand or any hand. Looks like it's unanimous. All opposed, raise your middle hand. Okay, that was unanimous.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
I also would move that we have LSO prepare a bill draft that would authorize the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission to expend an additional $7.5 million for plugging and abandoning and site and pit reclamation to be expended in the 2021 fiscal year.
Is there a second? There's a second by Laux. Second by a bunch of them. Okay, any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? One of the issues is that $7.5 million enough? Wasn't that they were saying they might need more?
So, Ms. Chairman Anderson, so they get 7.5. They're authorized to 7.5 for the biennium. I think if we did an additional 7.5, and that number can be changed. I was just looking for a bill draft, and quite frankly, this is better driven by the agency than the legislature. But I'm kind of, getting old, and I'm not afraid to wear a belt and suspenders. So it's all right.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. Do we want to include in there preference be given to Wyoming companies to do this work?
Sure. Yeah, that would be a friendly amendment, Representative Burkhart.
Preference, yes, but not hard line, because we'll run out of contractors real quick in Wyoming.
Mr. Chairman, that's why I said preference.
Yeah, good. Senator Rothfuss. Senator Rothfuss, you didn't need to talk?
Never mind.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Fuller would like to talk.
Why don't I let Brian Fuller talk then?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Greer, I just want to clarify, the motion would be 7.5 additional dollars, or just 7.5 million of their current administration appropriation?
I was thinking an additional 7.5. So that would bring them to like 11 million for the year, assuming all things are doled out equally.
Okay, anybody else? Rothfuss, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will make this point. The contractor preference concept, as opposed to an exclusion, usually we do a preference because we still want to get the work done. In all reality, I don't know if we still want to get the work done if we don't have Wyoming employees available at this point in time. It's just something to think about. I don't know how that would change the draft, but I don't want to expedite the process, spend their money, and do it by hiring out-of-state employees. I mean, that doesn't accomplish our objective. Now, how we draft that, I don't know, but that was the point I was going to make.
It's a good point.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Anything else before we vote on this bill draft? So this bill draft says we're going to give an extra 7.5 million to get the reservoirs done and the capping the wells, at least what they can get done. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, there's a bunch of them. All opposed, raise your hand. 2 opposed, and the rest are for it. So I think we've direct LSO to do a bill draft. Anything else? Representative Crank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to go back to Chairman Greer's severance tax. You talked about 25% drop in the price thing of $45 for oil. Are we looking at any other severance tax for coal, Trona, anything like that?
So Chairman Anderson, Representative Crank, has a 50% reduction on oil. And that's all I said was oil. And if anybody has other, I have been focused on, I've said this numerous times of, when the price of oil goes back up, what do we do to make Wyoming attractive? Our competitive states where capital is deployed are working harder than we're catching up to them, but they've been working hard. North Dakota's been very public about some of the actions that they've taken. New Mexico has done the same thing. And so what I want to do is just make sure that when the price goes back up, that those people deploying their capital know that Wyoming wants them. We want to get them in here. And once we start producing again, we can get back to hopefully getting our revenue streams back up where they need to be.
I think my thinking on that is that natural gas and coal are in a little different situation than oil being hit by Saudi Arabia and Russia and shutting them down, whereas we've just got an overabundance of the other two products that we've overproduced. Representative Crank, you had something else?
Yeah, I was just wanting to make sure we had a clarification before we got started, so we knew where we're starting from.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anything else on those 2 bill drafts, 3 bill drafts, whatever we have? 2, I guess we got going now. Okay, that sums up the day. We're starting tomorrow at 8:30. 8:30, Senator Wasserberger, that's 8:30 a.m. And
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I was having computer difficulties this morning. I really was.
Yeah, you and Co are computer difficulty guys, but we'll be better tomorrow. We'll be better tomorrow.
You weren't having problems like I was. You can ask Chris about that.
Okay, all right. If there's no objection, we'll adjourn for today. Hearing no objection, we're adjourned for today.